The Arizona sun was setting over Phoenix, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, when Margaret Sullivan decided to die. Not literally, of course, but in the minds of her 3 ungrateful children who were currently on a conference call in her own living room. Discussing her demise as if it were a business transaction, I stood frozen in the hallway of my own home, holding a basket of freshly folded laundry, listening to my children plot my future like vultures circling a carcass that wasn't even cold yet. Mom's 68 now, my eldest son Richard said, his voice crackling through someone's speakerphone. Statistically, we're looking at maybe 10 to 15 more years. We need to start positioning ourselves now. My heart, which had beaten strong for nearly 7 decades, suddenly felt like it was made of glass. Dad's life insurance and pension set her up pretty well, my daughter Jennifer chimed in. That was my baby girl, the one I had rocked to sleep every night for 5 years when she had terrible nightmares. $500,000 in assets, plus the house which is worth at least $400,000 in this market. Don't forget the lakefront property in Prescott, my younger son David added. That's another $200,000 easy. We're talking over $1 million total. I had to steady myself against the wall. The laundry basket slipped from my hands, and I held my breath, terrified they would hear. But they were too engrossed in calculating my worth to notice the sound. The problem is, Richard continued, and I could hear the frustration in his voice. Mom's in perfect health. She walks 3 miles every day, volunteers at the library, and just got cleared by her doctor for another 10 years of driving. She could live to be 95 like Grandma did. That's 27 more years, Jennifer said, and the disappointment in her voice cut through me like a knife. I can't wait that long. Brad and I want to open the restaurant now, while we're still young enough to enjoy it. We need capital, and Melissa and I are looking at that investment property in Scottsdale, David added. The market won't wait for Mom to. You know, there was a pause, heavy and suffocating. So what are we saying here? Jennifer asked quietly, another pause. Then Richard, my firstborn, the boy I had worked 2 jobs to put through law school, spoke words that would haunt me forever. I'm saying we need to explore options to accelerate the timeline. Not anything illegal, obviously, but there are ways to encourage someone to make end-of-life decisions. Assisted living facilities, for example. Once she's in one of those places, her care costs will eat through that money fast. Better we get our inheritance now, while there's something left, or we could suggest she start gifting us portions now, David suggested. For tax purposes. Mom's always been generous. If we frame it right, she might go for it. What if she doesn't? Jennifer asked. Then we have other options, Richard said, his lawyer voice taking over. Power of attorney, conservatorship if we can make a case for diminished capacity. She's 68. All we need is one doctor to say she's showing signs of memory loss or poor judgment. I couldn't listen anymore. I quietly picked up the laundry basket and walked back to my bedroom, each step feeling like I was walking through water. I closed the door, sat on the edge of my bed, the bed I had shared with my beloved Henry for 35 years before cancer took him, and stared at my hands. These hands had changed 1,000 diapers, wiped away countless tears, worked as a schoolteacher for 40 years to provide for my children. These hands had held Henry's as he took his last breath, whispering to him that I would take care of our babies, that I would make sure his life insurance and pension would secure their futures. And this was how they repaid us. I didn't cry, not then. Something cold and hard was crystallizing in my chest, something that felt like clarity. For the next hour, I sat in my room while my children finished their conference call downstairs. I heard them laughing, talking about meeting up next month to present the proposal to Mom, when they finally left Richard through the front door. Jennifer and David disconnecting from their respective homes in Tempe, and Tucson. I remained sitting in the growing darkness of my bedroom. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I called my own lawyer, Margaret. Martin Foster's warm voice came through the phone. It's been too long. How are you holding up? Martin had been Henry's college roommate and had handled our wills, the life insurance, everything. He was one of the few people who had checked on me regularly after Henry died. Not to ask for anything, but simply because he cared, Martin. I need to change my will, completely, and I need you to keep it absolutely confidential. There was a pause. Margaret, what's happened? I told him everything. When I finished, the silence on the other end was deafening. Those ungrateful, Martin started, then caught himself. I'm sorry, Margaret. That must have been devastating to hear. It was clarifying, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. Martin, I want to leave everything to charity. Every penny. The house, the Prescott property, all of it. I want to establish the Henry Sullivan Memorial Scholarship Fund for underprivileged children in Phoenix. That's what Henry would have wanted. Margaret, are you sure? This is a big decision. Maybe you should take some time. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I interrupted. Except maybe marrying Henry. Can you draw up the papers? I can have them ready by Friday, Martin said. But Margaret, you should know that your children could contest this. They might claim undue influence or diminished capacity, especially if Richard is thinking along those lines already. Then we need to make sure I'm thoroughly evaluated as mentally competent. I said, what do I need to do? I'll arrange for a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation with Dr. Patricia Chen. She's the best in the state for these matters. We'll document everything: your mental acuity, your reasoning, your understanding of your assets and decisions. We'll make this all bulletproof. That Friday, I went to Dr. Chen's office in downtown Phoenix. She was a woman in her mid-50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Double quotes Mrs. Sullivan, she said after our 3-hour evaluation. I want you to know that you scored in the top 10% of cognitive function for your age group. Your memory is excellent, your reasoning is sound, and your emotional intelligence is remarkable. Anyone who suggests you're not capable of making your own decisions is either lying or delusional. Can you put that in writing? I asked. I already am, she smiled, holding up a thick document. This will be part of your legal file. If anyone challenges your competency, they'll have to get through this first. The new will was signed, witnessed, and sealed by the end of the month. Martin kept the original in his safe, and I kept a copy hidden in my bedroom. Then I did something that surprised even me. I hired a private investigator. I want to know what my children are really doing with their lives, I told the investigator. A sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Martinez. I want to know if they're truly in financial difficulty, or if this is pure greed. What Rebecca discovered over the next 6 weeks was more disturbing than I could have imagined. Richard, my lawyer son, who claimed to be struggling with student loans and mortgage payments, was actually doing quite well. He and his wife Sandra lived in a $600,000 home in Scottsdale, drove luxury cars, and took expensive vacations twice a year. The struggling was manufactured. They wanted my money to upgrade to an even more lavish lifestyle. Jennifer and her husband Brad didn't actually have a restaurant plan. Brad had a gambling problem that Jennifer was desperately trying to hide. They had racked up $80,000 in credit card debt and were on the verge of bankruptcy. They saw my inheritance as a bailout. David, my baby boy, was the most shocking. He wasn't married to Melissa. They had divorced years ago, something he had never mentioned to me. He was actually living with a woman named Tasha who was 15 years younger and had expensive tastes. The investment property was a luxury condo he wanted to buy to impress her. They've all been lying to you, Rebecca said as she handed me the final report. I'm sorry, Mrs. Sullivan. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. Actually, I said, looking through the photographs and documents, it's exactly what I needed to know. I decided to wait. I continued my normal life, my morning walks, my volunteer work at the Phoenix Public Library, my book club meetings, my pottery classes. I was pleasant when my children called, which wasn't often. Maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks, and always with some subtle probing about my health, my finances, my future plans. Mom, have you thought about downsizing? Jennifer asked during one call. That house is so big for just you. You could move into one of those nice retirement communities. They have activities, healthcare on site. I'm 68, not 88, I replied cheerfully. I'm quite capable of managing my own home, dear. Of course, Mom, I didn't mean, she backtracked quickly. I just worry about you being all alone. I'm not alone. I have wonderful friends and a very full life. Another time, Richard brought up the subject of power of attorney. Mom, it's just smart planning. If something were to happen to you, someone needs to be able to handle your affairs. As your eldest and a lawyer, it makes sense for me to. I already have all that arranged. Richard, I interrupted. Martin Foster handles all my legal matters. You remember Martin, don't you? Your father's best friend? I could hear the frustration in his silence. The breaking point came at Thanksgiving. I hosted, as I always did. I spent 3 days preparing Henry's favorite recipes, the herb-roasted turkey he loved, the cranberry sauce his mother taught me to make, the pumpkin pie with extra cinnamon. I set the table with our good china, the set we had received as a wedding gift 40 years ago. All 3 of my children came with their respective partners. The grandchildren I had 5 filled the house with noise and energy that reminded me of when my own children were young. We sat down to eat, and Richard raised his glass. A toast, he said, to Mom, who always takes such good care of us. They all raised their glasses, smiling at me with faces that looked loving, but that I now knew were masks. Actually, I said, setting down my wine glass, I have an announcement to make. The table fell silent. I could see them all leaning forward slightly, anticipation in their eyes. This was it, they must have thought. She's finally going to talk about dividing up the estate. I've decided to do something that your father and I always dreamed about, I began. I'm establishing the Henry Sullivan Memorial Scholarship Fund. It will provide full 4-year scholarships to underprivileged children in Phoenix who want to become teachers. Just like your father and I were. That's nice, Mom, Jennifer said slowly. How much are you planning to contribute? Everything, I said simply. The house will be sold after I pass, and all proceeds will go to the fund. The Prescott property too. All my savings, investments, life insurance, everything will fund scholarships in perpetuity. I've already signed all the papers. It's done. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, could hear one of the grandchildren playing in the other room, oblivious to the bomb I had just dropped. Richard was the first to speak. Mom, you can't be serious. What about us? What about your grandchildren? What about you? I asked calmly. You're all grown adults with careers and homes. You don't need my money, but it's our inheritance. Jennifer burst out, her face flushing red. Dad worked his whole life building that nest egg for us. No, I said firmly. Your father worked his whole life to provide for me, his wife, in case he passed first. That money was to ensure I could live comfortably. It was never meant for you. This is insane, David said, standing up. You're throwing away $1 million on strangers instead of your own family? I'm investing it in the kind of future your father believed in, I replied. He was a teacher because he believed education could change lives. This scholarship fund will change hundreds of lives. She's lost her mind, Jennifer said to her brothers. We need to do something. She's clearly not thinking straight. I reached into the folder I had placed on the buffet table before dinner and pulled out several documents. I anticipated you might say that. This is a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation conducted by Dr. Patricia Chen, one of the leading experts in geriatric mental health in Arizona. It certifies that I am of sound mind and fully capable of making my own decisions. This other document is a statement from my financial advisor confirming that I understand all my assets and the implications of my decision. And this, I held up the final document, is my new will, properly executed and witnessed. Richard grabbed the psychiatric evaluation and scanned it, his lawyer eyes looking for any loophole. He found none. When did you do all this? He asked quietly. About 2 months ago, I said. Right after I overheard your conference call planning how to accelerate my timeline and divide up my assets before I was even dead. The color drained from all their faces. Mom. We can explain. Richard started. Please don't. I held up my hand. I heard everything. Every word. You weren't talking about a woman you loved, a mother who sacrificed for you. You were talking about an asset, an obstacle, something to be managed and liquidated. We were just planning ahead, David tried. That's responsible. You were planning my death, I said, my voice breaking for the first time. You were discussing ways to put me in a home to drain my resources faster. You were considering having me declared incompetent. You, Richard, the son I worked 2 jobs to put through law school. You, Jennifer, the daughter I sat up with every night when you had nightmares. And you, David, my baby boy who I supported when you dropped out of college not once but twice. Tears were streaming down my face now. But I didn't stop. I gave you everything, and it was never enough. You wanted more. You wanted it faster. You wanted me gone. That's not true. Jennifer was crying now too. We love you, Mom. No, I said softly. You love my money. There's a difference. I stood up and looked at each of them. Dinner is over. I'd like you all to leave now, Mom, please. Richard tried one more time. Let's talk about this rationally. You're upset, and you're making decisions you'll regret. The only thing I regret, I said, is not doing this sooner. Please leave. All of you, they left, one by one, with their families. The grandchildren hugged me, confused about why everyone was so upset. I held them tight, wondering when I would see them again, if ever. When the house was empty, I sat in my living room surrounded by the remains of Thanksgiving dinner and cried. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. For the first time in 5 years since Henry died, I felt free. The next few months were difficult. Richard tried to sue me, claiming I had been unduly influenced by Martin Foster. The lawsuit was dismissed. Within weeks, when the judge reviewed Dr. Chen's evaluation and my documented decision-making process, Jennifer sent flying monkeys, mutual friends and distant relatives to try to convince me to change my mind. When that didn't work, she sent me a cruel letter saying I was a terrible mother who was abandoning her grandchildren. David simply disappeared from my life completely, which hurt more than I expected. But something else happened too. The Phoenix community heard about the Henry Sullivan Memorial Scholarship Fund. A local news station ran a story about it. Other retired teachers began contributing to the fund. Local businesses offered matching donations. By the time I turned 69, the fund had grown to over $700,000, and we had awarded our first 5 scholarships to deserving students who wanted to become teachers. I attended the scholarship award ceremony at Phoenix College. 5 young people, 3 women and 2 men, from backgrounds of poverty and struggle stood on stage and spoke about their dreams of becoming teachers, of giving back to their communities, of honoring Mr. Sullivan's legacy. I cried again, but these were different tears. These were tears of purpose, of meaning, of a life well lived. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me. She was one of the scholarship recipients. A 19-year-old named Maria who had grown up in a trailer park with a single mother working 3 jobs. Mrs. Sullivan, she said, taking my hands, I want you to know that you've changed my life. I was going to have to drop out of college because I couldn't afford it anymore. My dream of becoming their teacher was dying. And then I got the letter about the scholarship, and I just I cried for an hour. You gave me my future back. I hugged her tight. This stranger who appreciated my gift more than my own children ever had. You remind me why I did this, I told her. Thank you, Maria. Make your dreams come true. Become the teacher you were meant to be. A year later, on what would have been my and Henry's 41st wedding anniversary, I received a letter from Richard. Dear Mom, I don't know if you'll even read this, but I needed to write it. I've spent the past year in therapy, trying to understand how I became the person who could plot my own mother's demise like a business deal. I have no excuse. What we did, what I led, was unforgivable. Sandra left me. She said she couldn't be married to someone who could treat his mother that way. Losing her made me realize what I'd become. I turned into someone who valued money over people, who saw my own mother as an obstacle instead of a blessing. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what we lost. Not the inheritance that was never really ours to lose. We lost you. We lost your respect, your love, your presence in our lives. We lost something that money could never buy, and we gave it up chasing money that we didn't even need. I saw the news story about the scholarship fund. I saw those kids on stage, talking about their dreams. I saw you in the audience, crying tears of joy. And I realized that's the mother I remember from childhood, the woman who believed in making the world better, who valued education and opportunity and helping others. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry. I don't expect a response. I just needed you to know. Love. Richard. He read the letter 3 times, sitting in my sunny breakfast nook with a cup of tea. Then I picked up the phone and called Martin. I want to set up a small trust, I told him. Not much. Maybe $50,000 for each of my grandchildren, to be used exclusively for their education. They can't access it until they're 18, and they can only use it for tuition, books, and educational expenses. Can we do that? Of course, Martin said. What brought this on? My children made their choices, I said. But my grandchildren shouldn't be punished for their parents' mistakes. They should have the opportunity to learn, to grow, to become better people than their parents were in that moment. You have a generous heart, Margaret, Martin said softly. No, I replied. I have hope. Hope that the next generation will be different, I wrote back to Richard. It was a short letter. Richard, thank you for your letter. I appreciate your honesty and your willingness to examine yourself. That takes courage. I'm not ready to resume a relationship right now. The hurt is still too fresh. But I want you to know that I haven't closed the door completely. Maybe someday, if you continue on this path of self-reflection and growth, we can find our way back to each other. In the meantime, I've set up education trusts for your children and your siblings' children. They'll never have to worry about affording college. That's my gift to them and my investment in the future. Take care of yourself, Richard. I hope you find peace. My single quotes M71 now. The Henry Sullivan Memorial Scholarship Fund has grown to over $1.2 million. We've awarded scholarships to 23 students so far. 7 of them have already graduated and are now teaching in Phoenix area schools. They send me cards, photos of their classrooms, stories about the lives they're touching. I live alone in my house, but I'm not lonely. I have my book club, my pottery classes, my volunteer work. I have Maria and the other scholarship recipients who visit me regularly, who call me Grandma Margaret and include me in their lives. I've started painting again, something I gave up when the children were young. My house is filled with my artwork now, bright splashes of color that make me smile every time I see them. Sometimes I think about my children. Jennifer eventually apologized too, though hers was less sincere than Richard's. She wanted to know about the education trusts for her kids. David never reached out at all. Part of me still mourns the relationships we lost. but a bigger part of me celebrates the life I gained. I learned something important in these last 3 years. You can't buy love, and you can't force people to value you. All you can do is value yourself, live according to your principles, and invest in a future that matters. Henry would be proud of me. I know that in my heart. He would be proud that I stood up for myself, that I honored our shared values, that I turned pain into purpose. Sometimes, late at night, I sit in my garden and look up at the stars. I imagine Henry up there somewhere, smiling down at the scholarship fund that bears his name, at the young lives being changed, at the teachers being created. I did it, my love. I whisper to the stars. I turned our legacy into something beautiful, something that will last long after I'm gone, and in those moments, I feel more at peace than I have in years. My name is Margaret Sullivan. I'm 71 years old. I'm a widow, a former teacher, a mother who had to learn the hardest lesson of all that sometimes loving yourself means disappointing the people you love most, but I would make the same choice again in a heartbeat, because some things are more important than keeping the peace. Some things are worth fighting for, and one of those things is your own dignity, your own worth, your own right to decide what your legacy will be. I chose to leave a legacy of education, opportunity, and hope. And that choice saved my life. If you liked my story, please share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do in Margaret's position? Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own values? I'd love to hear your perspective. With heartfelt gratitude for reading, Margaret.